How's it going, everyone? This video is a update of the Olympic medal standings, okay, for the Winter 2022 Olympics. And of course, the Olympics aren't over, so this data will change. I made a few videos during the summer 2021 Olympics where we looked at, okay, well, you can rank countries based on gold medal winnings or total medal winnings. And we actually talked about a third way that you can rank countries based on the value of the medals. I'll talk about that later. But what's interesting is you can actually plot the countries with how much golds they've won versus how much total medals they've won. And you get a picture where you actually have countries cluster together. So depending on how much medals they have total or gold medals, countries end up in certain groups, certain clusters, and this gives you some insight as to some visual geometric insight as to what categories different countries belong in, what countries are performing similar to. So for example, this graph here, okay, if you go from the top of the graph and work your way down, you have the countries ranked by how many medals they've won in total. Whereas if you start on the right and move your way to the left, you have how many gold medals a country has won from most to least. And so we see that countries end up in certain clusters, okay? Now, if you want to hear more about this system, how the graph works, what the medal value system is, I'll link the two videos from the summer 2021 Olympics. I'll link those below, so you'll see a bit more about how these graphs are made and how the value of each medal is calculated. But so what we see here, right? We're graphing for every country. We have a dot where we're graphing the total medals won versus the gold medals won so far. These numbers are going to change. So what clusters pop out? Okay, well, right away we have two countries at the very end of this graph, right? The top left. The higher you are means the more medals you've won, the more to the right you are, so top right, the more to the right you are, the more golds you've won. So right away we see Norway and Germany stand out here, right? Norway has substantially more medals in total. Germany has one more gold, but they are both in the same category, leading the pack here. And then we have a cluster just behind them, okay? And so this cluster has Austria really standing out with more total medals than the rest of the other three in the group, right? But you have United States, Netherlands, Sweden. They're grouped pretty close together with Austria not too far off. So these are the runners up where you could see them soon coming up in the lead, challenging Norway and Germany for their place in the top cluster here, right? Now, if you look at the rankings here, right? United States is pretty far down, right? Netherlands is pretty high up in terms of gold medal rankings. So is Sweden, right? Norway and Germany are, of course, right there, close to each other at the top, right? And so the clusters seem to mirror how the gold medal rankings go. And then you have China just next, right? Just under the United States, kind of farther away from this this runner-up cluster here, but not too far. Now, where things get interesting is, well, there's one dot here that clearly stands out, and this is Canada, right? So you have a row of countries who have won one gold medal, and their total medals, it's not too different from each other, right? It goes from one total medal to 6, and you have Canada really standing out with 12 medals in total, versus France, who has half that much, 6 medals in total, although they both won only one gold medal, right? So in the ranking by gold medal count, Canada is tied with France as a tiebreaker, a little bit below because they've only won 4 silvers instead of France's 5. But when you see the clusters form in these groups, right, these clusters form on the graph where they're graphing total medal versus gold medal count, you see Canada is really far from France and is actually closer to Russia and Italy, okay, who have 2 gold medals, but 12 and 10 medals in total, right? So if you're just looking at, top winners, right, you might not even reach all the way down to Canada, right? But when you look at these clusters forming, you see, okay, well, Canada really stands out here. They're actually not that far from Russia, even though by ranking, by gold medal, there's a lot of countries between Canada and Russia. Now, this is one graph we can create. What's interesting, when we look at the value of each metal, okay, so this is a way of ranking where we look at the dollar amount approximately of what a metal is worth, right? So the gold is worth approximately 800, the silver 450, and the bronze is worth 5. These are approximate numbers, but effectively what it means is 2 silvers is worth a little bit more than 1 gold, and a bronze medal is worth much, much less than silver or gold, but in the case of a tie, bronze acts as a tiebreaker. So if we rank countries by value of the metals they've won, well, the order changes a bit. Okay, so we see China and Russia, for example, not too far down. Same with Canada, not as far down as otherwise, because all the silvers they've won count for more. And when we graph the metal value versus gold medal count, we end up with different clusters. So first of all, Germany is way in the ahead. Okay, when we're looking at total versus gold, Germany, Norway, okay, kind of comparable. Value versus gold, we see Germany definitely in the lead, but Norway is second place, not too far off. And then we see a group behind them, this group of runners-up that could come close as more medal winnings come in. And so we have Austria, United States, Netherlands, Sweden, not too far off, catching up in that group together. Interestingly enough, that's the same group here, although here we see Austria is a bit ahead. And just like in our first graph, we had China not too far behind, here we also have China not too far behind. As for Canada, Russia, Italy, France, we do see them farther in the back, but they do stand out compared to the others who have won as many golds as them. Right? So France and Canada are leading those who have won 1 gold, and we have Russia, Italy, it's actually the 2 dots are overlapping, and they are leading those who've won 2 golds, but we do see them farther behind. Now another way to look at it is rather than graphing value versus gold medal count, we can graph value versus total medal count. Okay, and that gives us slightly different clusters. So first of all, Austria is way up there beside Norway. Okay, so Austria is no longer in the runner-up group. And we kind of saw it in that very first graph that among the runners-up, Austria really is ahead of them when it comes to total medals, right? And when we look at it from this perspective, okay, the value of the gold medals versus the total medals won, we see Austria right next to Norway. They've both won 14 medals in total, and the value very, very, very similar. Okay, when you look at the value of the golds and the silvers, Norway is a little bit ahead though. We certainly see Germany still standing out in the values of the medals that it's won, okay, because they've got a lot of golds, even though we're not graphing golds here, right? We see it in the values of the medals won, although the total medals is lower. Now what's interesting is if we look at the runner-up group, this cluster here, okay, we see Sweden, Netherlands, United States. So we see Italy here, which was lower down on the graphs before. Okay, we see the United States and Sweden, which were also pretty high up there. We also see the Netherlands. Now, in the previous graphs, we see Netherlands and the runners-up, right? Netherlands and the runners-up as well. We don't see Italy there, but when we look at values versus total, Italy starts catching up. Same with Russia, same with Canada, okay? So here, the silvers, which contribute substantially to the total medal count and the value of a medal, right? 2 silvers is a bit more than 1 gold. Well, then we see Italy, Russia, Canada, they're up there, right? They're a bit lower compared to the other runners-up, Netherlands, US, Sweden, but we see that cluster push their way higher really puts them on the radar. Whereas looking at this graph, for example, we don't really see Russia, Italy, Canada on the radar so much, but we kind of see them as outliers, although low in terms of total golds won, we do see them as outliers and somewhat standing out in the first graph here. Okay, and then after that first group of runners-up, we have the second group of runners-up where we see France, China, Japan, Switzerland. We do see France and Japan pop up on the radar as the second runners-up. In our previous graphs, we saw France but farther behind. We didn't see Japan as one of those leading clusters. And same with here, we don't see Japan in one of those leading clusters. France, we see farther below. We put them here to show the comparison with Canada. But when we look at that third graph, well, France appears up there in the same cluster as China, as Switzerland, and Japan as well. So they're farther up on that radar of winners, right? So what's actually going on here is these dots are really in a three-dimensional space, okay, where you have your three axes: gold medals, total medals, and this value amount that we invented. And again, you can check the videos linked below to see how that's calculated, the dollar value of the medals won. And these three different graphs are three different perspectives of looking at that three-dimensional space. And by seeing how the countries cluster together rather than just looking at ranking lists, we see, well, first of all, the same players are appearing at the top or as runners-up again and again. So we see who to pay attention to in terms of who could end up really in the lead. And we see that some countries, particularly we see Canada, Russia, Italy, France, Japan, you look from one perspective, they don't seem very high up there. You look from another perspective, and they actually do appear to have that potential to really increase how high they're ranked. And of course, some countries, right, Germany, Norway, Austria, they're always appearing as really far ahead, right, from all three perspectives. So looking at data in this way, not just Olympic medal data, but in general, seeing how your data points cluster can reveal certain interesting insights. Now, I'll be making more updates like this as the days go by and more medals are won. So I'm looking forward to that, and hopefully you are too, and I'll see you next time.